Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Hope you are all doing great. In this video I want to go over changing the FPC display connector for a Nintendo Switch OLED. I start out by applying some Kapton tape on the other connectors to protect them from the hot air, and I start applying some flux. Since I will be heating it from above, I like to place a little bit of flux over the connector itself to protect it. Since the connector contains original solder from the factory, which is lead-free, the temperature required is a little bit higher, but I don't plan on saving this connector since it had its bracket broken. So I am using around 400 degrees and I try to move it around and still not stay too much in the same area because I don't want it to affect the layers. The idea is that I try to heat from far away and getting closer and closer gradually until finally the solder starts to give. As soon as I feel like the solder melts, I can take it off. To prepare the pads for cleanup, I first apply leaded solder to it. This will lower the melting temperature and help it wick easier. I first apply some flux to the area and then prepare my solder wick and start wicking away. It's important to be gentle to all these places because it's really easy to rip a trace and then you have even more work. Once I'm happy with how the pads look, I will apply some isopropyl alcohol to clean away all this burnt flux. Burnt flux makes it really hard to do anything to the solder pads. Once the pads are nice and shiny, I use a Q-tip to clean it one final time and prepare some flux over these pads to pre-tin them using leaded solder. Using leaded solder means that the melting temperature can be lower. That way I can heat the connector from above. Now some people say that they are using heat from the bottom, but I found that in the Switch OLED the eMMC chip is on the bottom with a huge massive shielding. I don't know if it would still work to heat it from the bottom. I did really not want to crack the eMMC chip, so I decided to go with heat from above. Here I'm just cleaning up one more time and applying a new set of flux to all these pads in preparation for the connector. Once the pads are ready and the flux has been applied, I will use tweezers to gently place the new connector, which is again super fragile, to this board and try to align it as best as I can. I also apply a little bit of flux on the top because I think it will help it protect just that little bit more. It is very important that this second time around I use a lot lower temperature. I only use around 330 degrees Celsius. And I heat the board from far away and keep getting closer and closer, and you will need a lot of patience here to do this. Right now my connector moved a little, but that's not really a problem. I just nudge it back into place because once the solder is hot, the surface tension will pull it into place. I must confess that I'm not an expert when it comes to these micro soldering techniques, so look around YouTube for much better resources than me. But after 2 failed attempts, the third one actually worked out. My super recommendation is that if you do this, maybe purchase some extra connectors because they are very sensitive and they're quite easily burned. I myself had 2 failed attempts because of this, and luckily I had some extra connectors. These connectors are pretty cheap when you buy them from China. So yeah, maybe don't skip out on your backup connectors. Remember that patience is key, and once the solder is melted, if you nudge it a little bit, it should just stay in place. In theory, you should be as quick as possible with the heat because the more heat you use, the more stress you have on the board. Once the board has cooled off, I am cleaning the pads a little bit just so I can see better. And I am using a needle to poke each pin one by one to make sure we have a good solid connection underneath. Unfortunately, it's a little bit off to the side under my microscope. My field of view is a little bit larger than what we see on camera, but I think it's still visible. So I'm touching each pin very, very gently, and I'm making sure I'm only touching the bottom row because these pins are microscopic almost. So now I flip the board around, I do a little bit cleanup there as well, and again I take my needle and start poking. Most of the pins seem to be okay, however I found one that was loose. So make sure you do this step because it's extremely important and it will save you a lot of time. So right here, where it's the hardest to reach, I don't know if you can see on the video, but that pin is just slightly off, so it's not really holding. What I need to do now is get out of here, apply some flux, and using a hot iron, I am just retouching that one pin, hoping that I can get it into place. I have seen people on YouTube do the entire process using only a hot iron, but I tried it also and I think the airflow method is a little bit safer. Remember that if you keep the iron too much, it will melt the pin and you will need to start over with a brand new connector. I mean, it does have a little bit of tolerance to what you're doing, but you have to be quick. It's too bad that it's right on the edge and you can't see it very well. My microscope has a larger field of view than what we see in the video. But trust me when I say I'm just barely touching the tip of the pin, hoping that the solder will flow through. Now that I'm done, I clean it up and use my needle again to poke it, make sure it's solid. And it is. Now that everything has been cleaned with IPA properly, I am attempting to reattach the display cable. This is the part where most people break the display connector. I'm using my fingers because it's more tactile. All I'm doing is positioning the tip of it and then use some tweezers to put it into place extremely gently. Usually what happens is that when people do this step, they bend one or two pins and that's enough for you to get all sorts of weird artifacts coming from the display. I myself have fallen into this trap many times, unfortunately, but now I am super careful. Once the bracket has been locked, I clean it one more time just so there's no excess flux coming out or something I might have missed. And now it's time to reassemble the unit and test it and show you guys the final result. Success! Again. Just to make sure, I also test the touch functionality, and yes, that is working too. Just what I want to see. So thank you all for watching. Please leave in the comments better techniques or any other help you can give to anyone watching this video. Have a lovely day.